All right. I don't know if anybody's going to show up to this or if you're here right now. Um, I'm doing this live stream office hour. Right now, I'm riding around in my car using a hotspot. I'm not driving, obviously. I have a friend right now that's driving this car. But at any rate, this is just an office hour, which is open to students. As I mentioned yesterday, if you really want to have a few questions discussed, be happy to do it. But if nobody does show up and nothing happens, that's also fine, and I'll just have a 1 hour uh, YouTube live stream with nothing much on it. But I'm here. If you're a Chapman student and you're trying to ask me questions pertaining to tomorrow's midterm exam, then you would have a study guide, and you could tap in and just chat with me to ask the questions at any point. I'll be in my apartment in a moment. The reason that I had to start in the car was because this morning I was in a rush to try and get a few extra supplies, and I was trying to get to the supermarkets before there was like a run on most of the items. I was lucky enough to get a few things, but not to be worried about that. Um, it meant that I was a little pressed for time, so I carried my laptop with me, anticipating that maybe I would need to start the live stream, at 10 sharp, um, with the mobile setup that I've got in the car here. Now, what I'll do just to sort of see if I can generate any more attendance. I know it's not a mandated meeting. It's just there for the benefit of the students that want to take advantage. I'm just going to see right now on my Chapman emails. Anybody's so still here with you. Just open another window really quick on my MacBook, and I'm just seeing if there's anything in this inbox coming from you guys. Okay. Nope. Seems like everyone's in good shape on this. Cool. So yeah, you'll let me know if you have questions. If you do, I'm here to help. If you don't have any questions, then we'll just sort of have a chill hour here. But you know, I see only one right now that's watching. Whoever you are over there, hope you're having a good day. Um, but let me know if you got questions about your study guide, about this midterm, or anything else. I'm going to be on this live stream for the whole hour until 11. Sorry, I'm coming into my garage area here. I have to use the clicker to get the gate to open. There might be a little bit of dim light for a minute as I slide into this parking garage where it's underneath my apartment. So yeah, Chapman philosophy bonus office hour prior to the midterm. As noted yesterday, I'm here. Maybe I'll send a quick Blackboard message that could be helpful in case anybody doesn't know to tune in. So hold on one second and I'll just get that done. Okay, just a second. Get this email sent off to you guys. Not really necessary to do that, but I just think it's probably prudent. So hold on 1 minute. Okay. Hey guys, I'm just sorry. I'm looking at the screen as I switch windows, so that's probably why I don't look like I'm focused on the camera. I'm sending off emails to the whole class just to give them reminders. So one more second while I finish the last one. All right, I sent that off. Maybe that'll bring a couple more into the queue. What I have to do now is, because I'm parked in this garage, I have to carry the laptop with me up to the apartment. So hang in there while I do that. We're going to take a little walk. Richard, can you just get those things for me? Everything. Let me just put this. Let me detach the key. Push this button and slide it up. Slide. Push it and slide. Push it. Just pull it apart. Other side. Other side. Push that. And then you take it. Thank you. Okay. So yes, who is this, by the way? I don't know if there is a viewer or if it's just referring to me. Who's in there? Is it a person from Chapman? If not, and it's just anybody else, hope you're doing well. This is the Dr. Vulich YouTube channel, academic only, academic all the time, every day. Ready to help you guys with some philosophy stuff. It's kind of becoming an interesting video, isn't it? When you're carrying a laptop like this, it's almost like some type of music video or something. Just kidding. Okay. So this is, I mean, what a brave new world, huh? We're doing work while we're walking around town. To get groceries, just to get a few supplies this morning. But I'm always on time with my appointments. I know that there's a 10 a.m. Hour that I reserve for you guys. So that's why I said to myself, no matter what's happening, I'm gonna have the ability to start this live stream as promised. Okay. All right. Let me just get a little more situated here now that I'm back inside of the crib. All right. So yeah, virtual office hour. Let me get a little more light. And we're good to go. If you have questions, good morning. How are you guys? So just let me know when you're ready. Is the connection good? Are you still connected and you can see me and hear me pretty well? Hopefully so. So we've got all the materials that we need now. We're pretty much in gear. I have a couple of students, a couple of Okay, great. Thank you for letting me know. It's office time. It's 10:11 a.m. Sorry for the little bit of a bumpy start. I was just returning from the grocery store with a couple of supplies. So great. Thank you for your question. Magican, Magico example. All right. So what you're referring to here is the work of William Rowe. William Rowe's article, Why the Ontological Argument Fails. So he's trying to provide a criticism to Anselm's ontological argument. Anselm's argument defines God as the greatest conceivable being, and that is thought to be the main basis for saying that God has to exist in both the mind and in reality, because if you consider how great something could be, it would be greater if it existed in both rather than just the mind, so therefore God exists. Now, William Rowe takes issue with one aspect of the argument. He says, a thing cannot be proven to exist simply by defining it as something that exists. So in order to display why this is not a viable way to prove that something does exist, he invents these two terms. Now, the more important of the two terms for the purposes of his example is magican. So let's think about this word that he's talking about. Magican just means existing magician. That's just a definition of this made-up word. Existing magician, like, David Copperfield, Houdini, David Blaine, real people, flesh and blood people, not make-believe. Magico is the other one, which does refer to non-existent magicians, like the ones that you have in books and stories that aren't real people, like Merlin or Gandalf or whoever. So magican, though, is defined as an existing magician. And what he's saying is that that's similar in a sense to the way that the word God is defined, because God is defined in his estimation of the argument as a being that exists, as a perfect existing being. Now, imagine, if you can, that though I've defined the word magican as existing magician, that there were no magicians. Like, suppose, for example, that we were in a timeline where there were no such people. Or suppose that tomorrow everyone stops doing magic or they all die or something. If that's the case, there won't be these magicians. And the word magican would still be there, which would still have a definition attached to it, which says existing magician. But what the point of this whole example is that despite being defined as that thing which exists, it's not necessarily the case that anything in reality does exist which corresponds to this term. So although there are magicians that exist, the term defining magican as existing magician doesn't prove that. So when something exists according to the definition of a word, that's not the same thing as proving that it really exists in reality. So with magican and God, the similarity, he thinks, is that they're both defined as existing beings. But whether those things exist or not cannot be determined merely by the establishment of this term with this definition and meaning. So defining something to exist doesn't prove necessarily that it really does. In case it doesn't, then it's just a word which means by definition existing so-and-so, but there's no real thing like that. I gave a different example in class to help expand on this thinking of the critic, and I gave the example of unican. Like, let's say we made up a word unican and it says it means existing unicorn. But obviously there's no such thing as unicorns that do exist, regardless of whether I make this word up and I say that that is what its definition is and I stipulate that it means existing unicorn. So in terms of the example of magican, it's parallel to the unican example, and the overall case the author is making is that God is being claimed to exist just because we have a definition of God that says he does. But this is not the same thing as having a real proof. So that would be your little bit of help, I guess, with number 5, since you did ask. Let me make sure I've got enough lights. I think I do, but I'm going to try and just see if I can find a little extra. Well, anyway, I think that's good. Okay, Jordan. Principle of sufficient reason, and how does that relate to the proof of God's existence? All right, so This principle of sufficient reason was mentioned in the cosmological argument, which was discussed by Richard Taylor in our textbook and in our class. So the principle of sufficient reason is a principle which says that in the case of any positive truth, there has to be some sufficient reason for it. So in other words, there is a cause or explanation for any fact. In order to demonstrate the intuitive basis for this principle, he gives an example. He says, imagine hypothetically that a person was walking through the woods and encountered a large sphere, which is an unaccustomed, unusual sight in such a place as the woods. He says any person who did have such an experience would begin to question and ask, how did this thing get here? What is its ultimate explanation? What's the origins of the sphere? And though the sphere is an odd example to choose, he points at it because it's something weird enough that it would lead to these curious questions. And then after that, he says the same type of questions, what is its origin? What caused it? What explains that it exists? Those same questions can be asked about anything, whether it's an everyday thing or something unusual. So the principle of sufficient reason is the principle that is established on the basis of these examples, that when something exists, common sense clearly tells you that it must have had an original cause. Now, that then becomes a big part of the larger argument for God's existence, because it is mentioned that the universe is something which exists. And according to the principle of sufficient reason, the universe, just as much as any other thing, would therefore have to have a cause or an origin, an explanation for it. And in the case of the universe, the only possible explanation for it, the only possible cause, according to those that use this argument, is a necessary being, because otherwise the cause of the universe would be contingent, would therefore depend on something else, which would lead to an infinite regress, and that's deemed to be impossible. So there's a necessary being that starts the universe. The universe has to have a cause because of the principle of sufficient reason. And the principle of sufficient reason can be illustrated by means of examples in which we consider a natural reaction to the observation of something existing. So that would be, I hope, some good help for you on the number 7 question I see from Jordan. We've still got some good time in the hour. So I see here the question is, explain why Singer says that the problem of global hunger is not a problem of scarcity of resources, but is a problem of unavailability of, maldistribution and waste of available resources. So what Peter Singer's talking about there is this. He made the whole argument that people living in the first world should help and give money or food aid to people in the third world starving. Now, some have argued against that by saying that this is a futile quest because inevitably you cannot provide enough food for all the people that want it because we have a problem of overpopulation and scarcity of resources. If that was true, then with having too many people and not enough available food, there'd be no way to really solve a problem like that. You'd have to concede that some people inevitably won't be able to meet their nutritional needs. But author Peter Singer says, no, not true. He says it's actually not a problem of scarcity of resources. It's more about the way that we waste resources and poorly distribute them through the way that we consume and through the way that we waste. So on the one hand, waste, we buy more food than we need, and we let a lot of it go into the trash. And then the other part, inefficient distribution of available resources. One element of that he talks about is the reliance on the meat-based diet in basically most of the globe. Because of that, and the way we have to support animal agriculture to bring these meat products to the market for consumption, consumable resources by diverting them to these animals, livestock, and etc. And if that same amount of food had been given in direct course to humans, then that could have been a lot of the savings and efficiency in the availability of consumable resources that could support the whole global population. So he says, don't tell yourself that there's not enough food for everybody. There actually is, in theory, if we ate less meat pretty much and wasted less food. So that's what he's saying. Okay, so what's next? Anybody else has more questions? Let's continue. I appreciate you guys for being here on a Thursday, but I'm glad to be able to help a little bit. So you can tell me what's next if you have more.
Thank you. Just waiting for you. Okay, no problem. Yeah, if you just have a few, that's great. No problem at all. No need to spend more time than you need, but I'm here for anybody. Yes, all the live streams are saved. And even though this is just an office hour, I'm going to leave it up here as well. They're just going to all be archived for posterity. So if you ever, finish college later on in life, you might want to look back and see the type of stuff you were learning about, and it'll be there for your kids, grandkids, or anybody else. So, yeah. What's next? Oh, yeah, for sure. Argument from design? Okay, Jordan. So the argument from design, William Paley reported on this argument. Basically, he says, imagine if you found a watch. If you found a watch sitting in the forest or just anywhere, really, you'd know at least one thing about it, that this is something that came from an intelligent being. Because it's so clear that the watch had to be precisely assembled in a certain type of way for it to perform the function of telling time. All the little inner parts have to be precisely fitted. They have to be arranged in a specific ordering. And it seems to be something that can't just fall together by a random chance series of events. So a watch evidently is a thing that had a designer. Some intelligent being created a watch. And that's because it obviously has a function and these intricate inner workings of parts. So the author Paley just says then that if a thing with a complex function and intricate parts must have a creator with intelligence, then that can also be a point that we make about things that are seen in nature. Like, for example, he gives the case of the eye. The eye, like, your eyes in your head, can see. They can perform the function of sight, of vision. And that takes a lot of inner complexity, and the biological components of the eye, just as much as the watch, and even more so, have to be so detailed in the way that they're put together. Therefore, he says, a watch with a function must have a maker. So evidently, a thing in nature like the eye must have a maker as well. The principle established by the watch example was that a thing with a purpose or function must have a designer. And then that applies to things that we can see in nature, which, in like manner to the watch, have a purpose or function and an intricate arrangement of parts. So watchmaker is to watch as God is to eye. The commonality in the two examples of watch and eye are that they both exhibit a function/purpose, and that they have a highly intricate arrangement of parts, which must be carefully assembled in order for them to do their thing. So, that would be his argument. Just one way of putting it, if you like. So yes, what's next? If you have more, I'm definitely happy to continue with your guys' questions on this Thursday morning, Thursday, March 19th, 2020. Any thoughts, any questions? Hit me with whatever you have, and I'll be happy to just go on from there. We're at 10:25. We're about 30 minutes into this little impromptu bonus review session. If you have questions, let me know. Maybe you don't have questions. That's possible too. But there's a lot of students and a lot of questions, so I'm just here for anybody's help. Okay, great, Jordan. Thanks so much, and have a great day. Hope you're doing well and having good luck on your other finals. I wonder, what have you guys all done? Have you gone back home to wherever you all live? Because obviously you're not supposed to be at campus anymore. is it like a dorm room living situation and you're still there somewhere close to the campus, or are you guys all scattered back to different parts of the world, the country, the state? I'm curious what you're all doing. But anyway, maybe I'll find out someday. In my case, I live in Long Beach, so things haven't changed much. I'm just spending a little more time at the pad, but still doing all my same teaching. It's all online. None of that has really changed with the webcam and MacBook and stuff that I have. It's been pretty smooth transition to online, but it's a little weird when you're used to always being in the class. Nonetheless, I'm trying to make the best of it, so just like we all are. I'm happy to keep going with questions, though. Don't really have much to say, just kind of filling some time, but no big deal. I'm here, and I'm looking at the chat log, so whenever you want, tap in. So you say question 4. Hi, Eric. Can you maybe just remind me by tapping by just typing the question out so that I can see exactly what it says? I know it's going to be one of the early ones, maybe about like ontological argument, but I kind of don't have the list on me right now. So you'll see it and just remind me what it says. Moore's argument, okay, that existence is not a predicate. So this is another criticism of the ontological argument of Anselm. Keep in mind the argument of Anselm. He said that God is defined as the greatest being you can imagine. And to be as great as we could ever imagine, the thing would have to both exist in the mind and in reality, because this is greater than only just existing in the mind. Now, G.E. Moore takes issue with this argument because he says in his way of looking at it, Anselm is trying to look at the concept of existence as though it's a predicate. A predicate now is what? It's an attribute of something. It's a quality that something has. Like if a person says they're tired, then the predicate of being tired is the attribute that's being associated with the subject. So predicates are features, qualities, or characteristics of things, attributes of things. And the way that Anselm's argument goes is that if you're a perfect being, like if you're the greatest thing anyone could ever imagine, then you can't have any flaws. You have to be perfect in every possible way. And one of the ways that a thing can be more perfect is if it exists instead of not existing. But that looks as though we are considering existence to be an attribute, the possession of which enhances a thing's greatness, and the lack of which detracts from it. But Moore now has a problem with that because he says this is totally wrong. You cannot think of the word existence as though it was an attribute of something. To exist or not exist is not to have a quality or a lack of quality. It's just not an attribute. It's not a predicate. But he doesn't just say that. He wants to explain by means of an example. So he gives this example which utilizes a comparison between two sets of sentences. One set of sentences involves the term growl, and then the other replaces the word growl with exist. Okay, so we have these three groups. From the statement tigers growl, we divide it into these members. All tigers growl, most tigers growl, some tigers growl. Now, the point there is that they're all clearly understandable. They just say different things about how many tigers growl, but none of them is meaningless or incoherent. But if we substitute growl for exist, now we have got these new statements. Tigers exist, most tigers exist, some tigers exist. And in the case of these new statements, two of them don't make any sense at all, and that's all and most tigers exist. For example, considering the difference between the sentence most tigers growl and most tigers exist. When a person claims that most tigers growl, they mean that the greater quantity, the majority of them do, and the minority don't. That's clear enough to understand. But if this same understanding was to be applied to the statement most tigers exist, it would be interpreted as the majority of tigers exist and the minority of them don't. But it's not possible to compare the amount of things which do and don't exist, because things which don't exist have no quantity at all. They're just nothing. So it's kind of confusing or absurd to interpret the statement most tigers exist, unlike most tigers growl. And when we see that the breakdown in meaningfulness happens when we replace a predicate with the word exists, The author Moore believes that that shows us clearly that existence just does not behave in the way that real predicates do, so it's not an attribute of anything. Now, to be simple and straightforward, I mean, nobody describes things as existing, so that kind of rings true to common sense. Um, if you wanted to talk about your dog or something, and you said, yeah, it's a Cocker Spaniel, she's 10 years old, she's got like a patch of white fur, and she exists, the term or description of existence kind of stands alone as something odd to mention. So it's not really a way of describing a thing's attributes. But he specifically uses this linguistic comparison between tiger growl sentences and tiger exist sentences. So that's something essential to the presentation of Moore's idea if this question were to come up. So just that's something I can say to you. Eric, thank you for your question about existence not being a predicate according to G.E. Moore. Great, so what's next, if anything? It's 10:32 at this time, so we're just continuing with our hour. I only see a few of us here. I know I don't want to put anyone on the spot. If you don't have questions, don't worry about it. Sure, thanks, Eric, no problem. If you do have questions, though, don't hesitate to ask. I mean, I'm certainly capable of helping you out, but no pressure either way, so just I'll be here regardless. Probably a lot of people are doing their own thing today. I know it's not our class time. I'm just offering this hour for the benefit of anybody who wants to take advantage of it. Number 24, okay, as before, Eric, well, could you maybe type that one out for me so I can see the question one time? Basic criticism of utilitarianism. Okay, so utilitarianism is an ethical theory formulated by John Stuart Mill and a few others. It basically says that what you ought to be doing always is to act to promote the greatest amount of overall happiness for the greatest number of people. And that's the basic idea of it. Happiness is considered to be equivalent to pleasure in the absence of pain. So maximize as much of it for as many people as you can. But there have been criticisms to this theory. So one is that it could be seen as a theory fit for swine. We've talked a little bit about that. Some people believe that it's just not really an appropriate goal, the pursuit of pleasure. Maybe pleasure is something that animals are more suited to live their lives in the pursuit of. But human beings, you might argue, are more advanced than that, and we should be concerned with things that are of a more important intellectual nature than base pleasure. That's one possible criticism. Others include that it is too demanding. Some say this theory is just too demanding because it requires you to always be on the lookout for how you can generate as much happiness for as many people as possible. And there are a lot of examples in life where doing that would force you to abandon the care of people that you have closer relationships or bonds with. So you could not have favoritism or partiality or even familial partiality according to utilitarian thought, which is in some people's view too burdensome to be realistic. And then there's also the objection that utilitarianism could be seen as a theory which does not forbid any type of action, at least not in principle. And that's true of classical utilitarianism because it says that you should always promote the most pleasure for the greatest number, but it doesn't place any guardrails or restraints on what kind of actions this may permit. So in theory, the action of like killing, stealing, lying, cheating, or anything else could be theoretically justified in utilitarian theory if that action would generate more utility than the alternative. And that strikes many people as immoral and wrong. For example, suppose that we could take the organs from convicted persons in prison to save the lives of people who are healthy out there living free. You might argue that if one prisoner's organs could save the lives of 5 unhealthy, law-abiding citizens, then maybe depending on the nature of their crime and just looking at the numbers involved, it would be a good thing in a utilitarian world to kill the one in order to save a bigger number. But believing in human rights and believing that there's some fundamental behaviors like killing of other humans that are defenseless, thinking that that's always wrong, could strike you as a basic point against utilitarianism, because it allows for any action to be in principle morally permitted if that action was the unique way of maximizing utility in a given case. So I've mentioned a few big objections: that it seems to some to be too demanding, that it could allow any action to be permitted, and then also that some say it's a theory fit for swine because it's all based on pleasure, which some people think is more lowly and animalistic than what humans should care about. Okay, so that would help you out, I hope, Eric, for number 24. And we continue from there. Not too bad to have a small group, I guess, for an office hour. Everyone that had questions can get all their questions fully dealt with, and your voice is a little louder because there's only a couple of us present. So let me know if anyone watching has had all their questions answered, and basically if the chat gets down to 0 and I see that there's no one watching anymore, then maybe I'll just call it. But I'm here until then, and for now we still have a couple viewers. So either until that happens or until 11, whichever comes first. Yeah, I don't want to, just go over random questions. I'm just going to kind of, determine what to do based on your guys' questions and comments. So let me know. What's up? How's you guys doing? I'm just hanging out. Okay, 33. Thanks, Eric. Let's see what it says. Explain 2 potential differences between killing and failing to assist. Okay, so you're asking me about the work of Peter Singer. Peter Singer is arguing that we have an obligation to assist the global poor. And he says that because we have the means to do so. We have the means to do so, and we have the ability to do that without even undermining our own best interest that much. So it wouldn't take big sacrifices, basically, for us to give a little extra cash to the poor, and that would maybe save some lives and prevent some people from starving. And he thinks that's a worthy sacrifice that doesn't even really harm our self-interest in a significant way. And he wonders, if we have this extra wealth that we could use to help some of the poor, but we don't do anything, is that kind of like letting people die? Is that almost similar to killing even? Because when you kill, you're ending human life because you're directly the cause. When you fail to assist, you could argue that you allow people to die that would have not died if you had given assistance. But if the net result of withholding the aid or going out and killing is people die, what's the difference? Well, Singer says there are some fair differences between killing and failing to assist. He mentions 5. Okay? So number 1, he says there's a different motive. The killer is out on a bent on destruction. They want to end human life. So that's a terrible motive. But when you fail to assist, that's not your motive to hurt anybody. It's just to benefit yourself, to spend some money on yourself. So you understand, like, if you don't help out that decision that is instead based on you spending money on your own self, it's not at all based on a desire for anyone to be harmed or anything like that. So there's a different motive. Killer has the motive to kill and end life. Person that fails to assist does not got that motivation behind their failure to assist. Okay, so then there's difference in terms of certainty of the outcome. If a person's setting out to kill people, it's almost like 100% certain that there's going to be some dead people or some hurt, injured people. But if you fail to assist, the negative effect of your failure to assist might not be so much certain as the killer's negative effects would be, because the money that you could have given might have gone to an ineffective aid agency or initiative. So when you fail to assist and you withhold the money, maybe that's not going to really hurt anybody because the money might have been misspent. But if a person goes out to kill, there's not the same, like, who knows if anyone will get hurt. It's almost certain that someone will. So there's a higher level of certainty of people getting hurt in the case of killing as opposed to failing to assist. So we talked about motive. We talked about certainty of the outcome. There's also identifiability of the victim. So if a person has killed, then there's dead people and the victims have got identities, and we can clearly connect the loss of those people with the behavior of the killer. But when someone fails to assist, right, like they don't give money to charity, there's no way at all that you can link that individual failure to assist with any specific person's death from starvation in the third world. So it's not as if we can align one individual's choice not to give in money or whatever with any particular person's death. So there's not the same identifiability of the victim. You can't say who it is who's come to die as the result of one randomly selected person's individual decision not to give aid. So we said different motive, certainty of the outcome, identifiability of the victim, and then there's two more. So one more he said was that another difference, it's not hard to avoid killing. That's not hard at all. But it is hard to save all the lives that you could possibly save by means of helping and giving aid. So you could argue that killing and failing to assist are also different because there's a different level of difficulty living up to the obligations to either not kill or to go assist. It's easy to not kill. It requires literally doing nothing. But it's not so easy to save lives by assisting people because that does not require inaction. That requires, at a minimum, the action of giving money. Okay, so there's another difference. And the final one was that you can always say it's not my fault that they are poor, but you could not say that if you had killed people. So you wake up or you're born in a world where there's already a lot of poor people out there starving. And it's not really at all because of you individually that this fact exists. So you could say, I have no obligation or responsibility to address this problem because I didn't cause it. If I killed people, then I did cause a problem and I deserve any accountability that comes from doing it. But if I fail to assist, it's just like not doing something about problems that I have not been the cause of. So those are all claimed differences between killing and failing to assist. The question you're mentioning, 33, Eric, it asks for 2 of the 5, but I mentioned all 5 just to give you the whole range. So different motive, degree of certainty of the outcome, identifiability of the victim, not hard to avoid killing, hard to save all that you can, and you can always say it's not my fault that they're poor. Okay, so there's another one for us. Time keeps moving on, and we're getting a little closer to 11, but we can continue with whatever thoughts, questions, or comments you still have with this little window we still got, so let me know. Shopkeeper example from Kant. Okay, well, Kant said that only an action that's motivated by the motive of duty has moral worth. And if an act is done from the motive of inclination, it has no moral worth. So yeah, I'm gonna try and explain it. So if you are a shopkeeper and a kid asks you how much something costs, you have a choice. Are you gonna tell him the real price, or are you gonna give him a fake price that's expensive so that he, gives you extra money? Now, let's say the shopkeeper wants to rip this kid off, and that's what he really wants to do, but he forces himself not to just because he realizes that that's immoral. In that case, he's giving a fair price, and he's just doing it because it's his duty, not because he wants to. In fact, he doesn't want it. He's doing it because it's his duty, not because he feels good about it. On the other hand, there's another shopkeeper who gives the same price that's fair and the correct price, but he doesn't do it because it's his duty. He does it because it feels good, and he just loves the child, and he loves being fair to people. So in the second example, the person did it from the motive of inclination, meaning they did it because they felt good and they wanted to do it and they desired to do it. When you do things because you just feel good about it, that's doing it from the motive of inclination. When you do it because it does not feel good but you feel like you have to, that's done from the motive of duty. Kant says that when you act from the motive of duty, that's the only time that it has moral worth. So when you go out and you do stuff just because it feels good, that motive is not a moral motive. In fact, that motive is going to lead you into immoral behavior a lot of times. So he says the pure case of an individual who's acting from the motive of duty alone is when they have a disinclination to do what duty requires, meaning they don't feel like doing it, they desire not to do it, but they make themselves act that way strictly out of a feeling of obligation to the moral law. Okay, so this shopkeeper example provides an example that distinguishes the two types of motives, the motive of duty versus the motive of inclination. And it's supposed to indicate that it's when done from duty alone that the action has got a moral value to it. Okay? So yeah. I mean, you can think about this. This is maybe a weird example, but it's kind of parallel to the shopkeeper thing. They're telling everybody, right, to self-quarantine and not to do any kind of big social gatherings, obviously, or to go out in public and maybe infect people or whatever, get sick. Now, suppose that there's somebody who just loves being inside all the time, and they're kind of, that's like they're a little bit introverted, and if they had it their way, they were already doing that before the whole quarantine. Now, take another person who they're the biggest socialite, the biggest outgoing, person, and always wants to be in a big crowd. And now they feel like, well, asking me to be inside all day is like a big burden. I feel like going out. I want to go out. That's my biggest desire. But I feel like it's a moral obligation to me to stay home. So out of a great act of will, I'm forcing myself to stay home. Now that person's doing it just because it's their duty, not because they're inclined to do it. Now take the other type of example. The person loves being at home. They wouldn't have it any other way. They're like agoraphobic. They're scared of even being out there in public. So in this case, the person's doing the thing that I guess the moral duty would command them to do, but they're not doing it on a moral basis. They're just doing it because they have an inclination to do it. And so it's not done like on a righteous moral basis. You wouldn't say of such a person, good on you. You're being a good person by staying home. You just tell them, okay, well, lucky for you, you're doing what they're commanding. Your moral command is to do the same thing that you already feel like doing. I don't know. I hope maybe that could help somebody. It helps me anyway, thinking about it. But Eric, just to give you a second look at the underlying point that this shopkeeper example is trying to make, I'm just giving you a second thought about it, coming off the top of my head while I'm explaining the concept to you. So anyways, anything else, I'm happy to take. Not a ton of time left, so if last question or so is there, and I'll go ahead and see what I can do for you if you have one. If not, that's fine too. You like the parallel? I mean, hopefully, yeah. If it made it clearer to you, you can sort of see in line with our current situation what Kant was trying to get at it, basically. Mm-hmm. Me, I'm probably not the kind that just feels like, oh, great, I was already quarantining. I've seen memes like that. The one that was like, when you find out that your everyday lifestyle is called quarantine, it's like that scared face, like, oh shit. But no, I'm not like necessarily always in the house, but making do. It's not too bad. Well, let's see what's good. If anything else is on your mind, throw it out there. But like I'm saying, if not, then we're just having a couple of minutes here before we get on to the rest of our day. Whatever you guys got going on today, I hope you have a good day. But yeah, 28, what's that one? Keep in mind, I'm not looking right at the list just now. Kitty. My cat. So anyway, yeah, 28, I still written question. You could tell me and then I could try and say a few things real quick. O'Neill's account, oh yeah, that's just a simple small one. The second version of the categorical imperative says that you should never treat the person as a means to an end. And Honora O'Neill is just a current day British woman philosopher, and she says, let's try and simplify that in a way everyone can kind of make clear sense of. She thinks that what Kant basically was saying is that you can't treat someone as a means, and so you treat someone as a means when you involve them in an interaction that they would not consent to. So basically, the moral law requires that in your interactions with other human beings, that you will never treat other human beings as things to be used in order to achieve a goal. And in other words, that you not do anything with or to the other people that they would not agree to if they had full information. So doing things to people that they wouldn't agree with is violating the second version of the categorical imperative. That's when you treat someone as a means. So like if I steal something from somebody, that's not consented to by the victim of theft. So that's a violation of them because it's treating them as a means to my goal of acquiring the possession or the wealth. Somebody who, I don't know, like if they were sadistic enough to like find pleasure in just hurting somebody, so they just assault and batter somebody and they get like a thrill out of it, then they're using that other person's health and well-being as a means to the end of their sadistic pleasure. I don't know if I'm stealing, lying. If I deceive another person in order to get something of benefit to myself, then I'm not allowing them to understand what my true motives are, and they would not have consented to be lied to if they had known what I was doing. So basically, don't do stuff with or to people that they would not agree to under the condition of full information. And that's what Honora O'Neill said is the idea of treating someone as a means. You treat someone as a means when you involve them in an interaction that they would not consent to. So just ask yourself when you act, am I doing something to a person that they wouldn't agree with? And if the answer is yes, then that's wrong, and that's violating them. That's treating them as a means. That's against the moral law. So thinks Kant. Okay. So I don't know what else. Well, I mean, we've had a pretty good session. Thanks to you too, Eric. I really appreciate the questions. It's good for you. It's good for me. It's good for other students if they come back and look at the live stream later. All right, awesome. Well, thanks, guys. I'll definitely just be in touch with you tomorrow. I'm going to send you your exam form in the morning via Blackboard. So be ready with your emails and be ready to type or write, however, and then return to me an attached file that I can easily open, so you'll get your midterm done and then be off to spring break. That's going to happen tomorrow. We'll be in touch by email in between now and then. So anyways, have a great day, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and go Panthers, and I'll see you guys.